What is up guys, welcome back to my reaction channel. It's your boy Chris, back again with another SCP reaction videos. Today we're gonna reacting to SCP-001 When Day Breaks, Saint Elmo's Fire. This was by this is not an animation SCP, It's by SCP Illustrated, Pete, Dr. Cimmerian, y'all know it. Anyways, like the video, subscribe to my channel, hit the bell button for post notifications. If you have any suggestions, comment down below. Want to see more of my reaction videos, check out my playlist. With that being said, let's get into the intro.
This video is sponsored by Sellart's Playing Cards. Thanks to Sellart and a successful Kickstarter campaign, here we have the SCP Foundation Playing Cards, a full pack of regular playing cards for all SCP
Yo, that shit
themed.
looks good though.
Each of the 4 suits have their own distinctive background style, and all of the jacks, queens and kings have their own illustrations, as well as both of the jokers naturally. The cards are all beautifully printed on high quality paper. They
looks
have their own custom reverse image and come with their own gilded packaging. So the next time you are having a games night and are in need of a pack of playing cards, ditch the old familiar ones and get these awesome ones out instead. Follow the link in the description to the official website and get your own deck of SCP playing cards now.
Viewer discretion is advised. The warmth of the sheets and the cool morning air was the first thing Dr. Bright
Nobody
noticed.
answered my questions though.
The taste of cigarettes and regret came shortly afterwards.
Is it where the ending
The stabbing pain of his hangover followed. He winced at a ray of sunlight shining on the bed beside him and realised he wasn't in his own bed. A woman wearing his shirt and a pair of socks was standing at the window, staring out at the sunrise. Bright considered a lot of things in that moment. He turned away from the woman and grabbed his necklace and phone from the nightstand.
You know, with the
woman,
shit.
startled by his fumbling in the dim morning light, put a hand on the window, but didn't move away from it. Bright took real stock of his surroundings. A row of stuffed animals occupied a space on the floor to his left, beside the window. The paint on the walls and many pieces of furniture were various shades of pink, and little red hearts covered the blankets.
You know what?
He offered with a chuckle.
You can keep the shirt. I've got to go.
With that, the woman turned to face him, her face covered in boils and melting skin.
I didn't expect that.
Talk about going to bed with a 10 and waking up with a 2,
he said, as the woman lurched towards him and out of the light.
I didn't expect that though.
Dr. Cimmerian was about to fall asleep when the power at Site 88 died. His eyes shot open. The unnoticed air circulation system and the hum of lights outside his room quieted. The buzz of the emergency lighting system came to life shortly afterwards. The vents murmured as air began to flow again, though slower and quieter than normal. It had been 3 years down here, and 3 years of trouble. Power outages were new though, and troubling in a brand new way. Without power, they couldn't stay down here. Without power, they were probably all dead. Maybe sooner rather than later, as they lived directly under a nuclear power plant. He reached for the landline next to his bed, but there was no tone. He cursed and stumbled to his feet. The room was large enough for a bed, a side table and a small carved wooden cabinet. A rushing march of feet sped by his room and faded into the background. The emergency intercom croaked to life and delivered its message.
All staff report to your designated evacuation zones. Repeat. All staff report to your designated evacuation zones.
The automated message continued. Cimmerian cast about in the dim light of his clothes and then his shoes. He gave up on finding his tie, but pulled on his boots. He opened the door and went down the hall.
Pause. Cimmerian? Wait, is this a self-insert? Is the YouTuber Dr. Cimmerian inside the SCP itself? What the fuck? Yo.
Wait. He looked up at the stairwell, glanced at the inoperative elevator, and then made his way upwards. Cimmerian made it to the top of the stairwell in record time.
Holy shit, it really
he
is
went to the lockers
though.
next to the airlock and pulled out his equipment. He pulled on his MTF uniform and triple-checked his flamethrower. He ran one hand over the MTF's logo printed on the body, an image of Elmo with a halo, against a background of flame. When the end of the world came and went, Cimmerian found himself redundant. There's something to be said for redundancy in the apocalypse, but not his kind. An ethics guy with a doctorate in English literature wasn't redundant, it was annoying. It had taken almost a year for him to retrain himself to be useful at the end of the world, but here he was. He'd always rated well at the staff gun range, but was nothing special when compared to the agents or MTF members. A flamethrower, though, was a lot easier to aim, so he and the 3 other useless doctors had something to do at least, and if they died, well, no big loss. The team commander, however, was a veteran, a Navy SEAL commander recruited in the late 90s and notorious for his skill and valour in the SCP-457 breach of 2009. Agent Thompson walked into the room with a cigar in his mouth. He began to bark orders.
Triple check your equipment. Make sure nothing is exposed. Any of you lot turned into drippy flesh monsters on my watch, and I'll put you down myself.
The MTF commander walked into the middle of the room and sat down on one of the benches.
Listen up. We have a power interruption. There was no communication before it happened. No one knows what we're going to find up there. If we open the door and the flesh pours in, you breathe fire until we get the door closed. It's a waxing crescent and it's nighttime, which means we're at a lower risk of exposure, but do not get complacent. It just takes a single bit of moonlight to turn you into one of them.
The MTF commander put his cigar out on the bench.
Our goal is to the control room. We establish contact with the staff there and find out what happened to the power. If they're dead or gone, we figure out how to turn the power back on ourselves. Lieutenant.
Cimmerian perked up.
Yes, sir?
You take point. Take Kaplan and Liara with you. I'll be right behind you with Travis.
Yes, sir.
Scramble gear on, everyone. Watch your footing. No chit-chat, and let's make it a night to remember. Everyone ready?
Once the equipment was triple-checked, the other team members nodded in agreement. The commander barked again.
Good. Travis, unseal the airlock. Close it behind you on the way out and cover our 6. Alright, Omega 5. Show me what you've got.
As Cimmerian emerged from the inside of Site-88's underground facilities, he was struck most by how quiet the world above was. No birds, no insects, no animals at all. Then he looked up at the giant cooling towers in front of him.
Wait.
He paused for just a moment too long as Kaplan and Liara banged into his back. He moved forward.
This is something that doesn't explain in SCP animations and shit. Does the animals also get affected by the sunlight? Because if they are, then they really it makes sense in this story, you know, that there's no animals, there's no bugs and shit, because they also got absorbed, you know. They also turn into that thing.
Letting his eyes drop from the cooling towers. They moved to the power plant's offices and control rooms. Then he flipped a switch on the scramble gear for night vision. The scramble gear was useless leftover tech from the SCP-096 project. It was questionable, honestly, how so many of them had ended up at Site-88, as it never once hosted SCP-096. For once, the wheels of bureaucracy were useful, though. If Cimmerian had to guess, at some point it must have been a consideration to move the object here. Then either no one followed up on it, or the world ended before they could. Still, an eyepiece with near-instant digital reproduction of real-world light was a useful tool now. What it allowed was the ability to execute surface missions, as long as the goggles get recharged. Without power, though, even that was impossible. Cimmerian moved forward into the silence of night, and the team followed him. They made it another 40 feet before he raised a hand to pause. He could hear a faint, gurgling noise to his right, but as the team held in place, it got no louder, and it got no closer. He imagined it was perhaps running water from the cooling pond, maybe. He motioned for them to advance, but more slowly. As they reached the first door, he directed Kaplan to open it. He nodded and moved forward. He took the right-hand side, and Cimmerian took the left. Liara followed after them both to cover the centre. In one swift motion they all quickly entered. Cimmerian moved, rifle raised, into the far right corner of the room and confirmed an all clear with his colleagues. Not one piece of furniture was where Cimmerian expected it to be, and a single man lay against the wall, a tiny bullet hole in the right side of his head, and a standard issue Glock sat in his hand.
Never mind.
The commander gestured to the corridor leading out of the room. The rest of the facility was much the same. Empty rooms, tossed furniture, the occasional suicide.
Pause. I know I'm asking stupid ass question. I'm pausing a lot in this video. Just bear with me, please. What happened to the MTF? You know, the Mobile Task Force. What happened to it? You know, where are they now? Are they just turned into those things too? You know, because if I remember correctly, each MTF is special. Each member of MTF, you know, each division of MTF is specialized into handling a certain SCP. You know, there's this SCP was specialized in handling the old man. There's this SCP. There's this MTF who specialize in handling this kind of scenario, but at the same time they don't handle other scenarios. Such as they have specialties, you know, right? So what happened to them, you know, in this story? I'm just curious.
And then they came to the control room. The chamber itself was actually quite large. Various pieces of mechanical and electronic equipment lined the walls. The centre of the room showed signs of a struggle, though. 4 men lay on the floor with bullet holes in their heads, and pistols at their sides as well.
Oh, they suicide.
What the fuck happened here?
Cimmerian said, looking around. The rest of the team stood in silence for several seconds before Thompson spoke up.
Looks like the flesh rolled through here.
Oh no.
These guys hit the emergency shutdown. Then they shot themselves before they could get taken.
Cimmerian shook his head.
Big brain move.
But then, why didn't the flesh drag them out into the sun anyway?
That's not our concern. Liara and Kaplan, get those battery backups going and find out what it'll take to get things running again.
Guys,
Sim and
are
Travis,
SCPs affected by the when they breaks? Or
everyone moved into position.
Got,
Shortly afterward, the room buzzed as computers came back online. The battery backups also caused the lights to sputter back to life for a moment. Then they began to flicker. Cimmerian stopped and started to concentrate on his breathing. The flamethrower in front of him was only slightly comforting, given the situation. He knew it was standard operating procedure to kill yourself if you thought you might get taken. But they almost always grabbed the bodies anyway, and let them melt in the sun.
Yeah.
No one knew for sure if scrambling their brains helped. It was a small comfort everyone who went or worked topside believed in. Perhaps it was a comforting lie. But it worked. Cimmerian reached down and felt for the pistol at his own hip, and a bit of calm washed over him. In the darkness, an eyeball crawled out of a ventilation shaft and plopped onto the ground.
It's
The
looking
ocular
at them.
nerve trailed behind it and continued back into the vent. It wriggled and pushed itself ahead. The creature it belonged to was looking around the facility too, for anyone alive, anyone not already taken by the sun. It was startled slightly when the MTF team reached the facility.
Disgusting, bro. What the
Then
fuck?
it felt a sense of relief. It was right. This really was where Site-88 was located. Deep in the bowels of the facility, a massive wave of flesh began to move of its own accord. The flesh rolled end over end out of the cooling pond. Then it went to meet back up with the parts of itself that were patrolling the facility. It was time to finish this. Cimmerian saw it first. A dozen tendrils of flesh crawled on the floor and towards them from the hallway ahead. He let out a blast of fire in the flickering darkness, and the telltale screech of the flesh answered him. Travis and Cimmerian closed the door and stood with their backs against it. A dull thud, followed by a smacking sound, came from the other side. Then the flesh began to leak into the room, first under the door, and then from every crack and crevice. Cimmerian made a dash for the second exit, but the commander grabbed him by the arm.
There's no point in that, Lieutenant.
Yeah.
These fuckers are pack hunters. If there's one already here, then you can bet your ass there are 2 more out there.
Better be your last stand, bro.
All of you prepare to engage.
The men and women of the MTF moved to a defensive posture at the center of the room. Then they turned their flamethrowers outward.
That door is about to come down. As soon as it does, light these fuckers up.
Badass,
felt for
bro.
the pistol at his
Holy
side again.
shit.
He could feel his heart beating out of his chest as the adrenaline flooded his veins. Another groaning whine came from the door as the hinges began to buckle.
Continuous fire until we are clear.
The commander gave a small laugh and delivered a final statement.
May Saint Elmo protect us.
Holy shit.
With a crash, the door broke apart. The flesh poured into the room and tentacles reached out for them. The room was quickly filled with fire and flesh. Agent Thompson was the first to go for his pistol as the end came. A long life of training let him unholster it quickly and fire one shot into his temple. He dropped to the ground just as the monster reached him. The doctors all fumbled with their holsters in the precious second left to them. Cimmerian actually managed to get his pistol out. The tentacles grabbed his arm, and the shot went off harmlessly into the ground. The rest never had a chance. The flesh swarmed them. Cimmerian was grasped by both arms and both legs before being raised into the air. Then something vile rolled into the room. It vaguely and somewhat poorly imitated a human in size and shape, but the proportions were all wrong. The head too bulbous, the arms too thin and spindly. It moved on wobbly legs inexorably forward. Then it stopped in front of Cimmerian's face.
That's the big boss.
Fucking finally.
It said, in a single voice.
Huh?
It's me.
Cimmerian's eyes went wide.
Bright?
Look.
The creature
Oh,
produced
shit,
a familiar
bro.
ruby and silver amulet from a fold in its skin.
Holy shit. Right?
It's right, bro.
Cimmerian asked.
The one and only. If I
God
let you
damn,
go,
bro.
will you promise not to kill yourself?
Cimmerian nodded,
Yo,
and the creature let him drop to the floor. He landed on his feet but dropped to one knee immediately from the impact. He gave a
bro,
mournful
that's
glance
plot
towards
twist
his
as
former
hell.
commander
That's good,
before
bro.
looking up at the monstrosity standing over him.
What are you?
The creature
Wait, how
gave
did
the
he
approximation
survive,
of a
though?
shrug.
I'm not sure.
Maybe because
But I need
of
your
the
help.
medallions
Cimmerian
and
looked
shit,
at
you
the
know?
other dumbfounded members of the MTF, silently trapped in tendrils of flesh and sinew.
R.I.P. to
Help
the one who
with
killed
what,
themselves.
right? What do you know about Yellowstone?
Get wrecked.
The reset button? Aye. That's the one.
That's the reset button.
I know only a human hand can activate it, and it's almost 2,000 flesh-infested miles away.
Sounds like a road trip sim.
Bright, what the hell are you talking about?
I'm talking about saving the world. You guys in?
Shit.
Or are you out?
Yo, I'm to continue this shit, you know what I'm saying? This is so good, you know? Damn. Guys, I feel so sad for that. I feel so sad for that fool who kill himself before the flesh can, like, take him. Bro. Bright is so bad, bro. It's so bad, bro. Why did you... Why did you wait for it, though? Like, damn, you let the guy kill himself. Bro. Anyway, guys. I got a lot of questions that need to be answered in this. Also, I'm gonna continue this series, you know. It's so good. So, one is that, what the hell is Apollo class, you know? Apollyon class. What the hell is that? Is it another world-ending class? You know? What's that? Is that even powerful, you know? Where does it put into the three other classes, you know? Also, does other SCPs get affected by the light of when day breaks? Did they get affected by the light, or they just can walk while the sun is up, you know? They can walk outside. That's the second question that I have. And the third question is, how the fuck? I know Dr. Bright is immortal with that medallion shit, but isn't it explained that the sun, when day breaks, actually taking other people's soul and twisting it to make it, like, torture it, you know? So how is it still it? Oh! Maybe his soul was trapped inside the medallions and shit, and thus he isn't affected by it, you know? Maybe that's why. But hey, we're gonna watch this soon, you know. Gonna continue the series and shit. Like the video, guys. Subscribe to my channel. Hit the bell button for post notifications. If you have any suggestions, comment down below. That is SCP-001 When Day Breaks, St. Elmo's Fire by by SCP Illustrated with Dr. Cimmerian. Anyways,